Hey, so we're live, everybody. Thank you for tuning in and stopping by on this Sunday. We have a packed, busy session today, talking about our vote. I'm gonna do it real brief, just to introduce everybody. Of course, we have my lovely co-host Ty, and we have Cash, we have Charles, we have Liz, who happens to be a listener that's been following for a minute. So thank you, girl. And then we have Horace, and thank you for being here and showing your perspective on this serious subject. Before we get into anything, I'm going to pass it to Ty. She may have something to say. Go ahead, girl.
I always have something to say, but really quick, guys. In the very near future, we will be transitioning off of Facebook Live and just streaming from our YouTube page. So if you want to continue to follow us and you like what we do, go to YouTube at Mothers Unfiltered and subscribe and like. And that's pretty much it for right now.
All right, cool. So this segment I'm gonna do me and Ty gonna do some moderating. We're just gonna be asking some questions, and definitely please put your questions up so we can get those questions answered. So jumping into everything, 2016, Donald Trump wins the nomination. 53% of white women voted for him. And they voted for him for many reasons, but a couple of people that I was reading and hearing their testimonies, they were mentioning because of the fact they felt secure and safe, and they wanted to support, their party. Do you feel that because of the fact that it's a woman VP, first, woman, not the first woman VP, but the first Black woman VP, that this is going to make a difference in reference to the feminist movement, and everybody supporting them, and everybody's like, hey, because we're in the movement now, the Black Lives Matter, that will make a change since we have everything going on. Anybody could jump on that question, but just wanted to know, do you think that will make a difference in reference to the female vote?
I mean, okay, as a female, I'll jump in. So I think that it does make a difference in feeling that your voice is being heard, and that what's on everybody's mind is actually now more front and center than ever. So I definitely think it'll make a difference. I don't necessarily think it'll change votes. For the most part, at this point, I feel like everybody knows who they are and what side they're on. And I don't see any women switching over to our side because, oh, we got a woman on the ticket. But I do think it's validating that she is on the ticket, and that it does make the people that were already on this side feel that much more that we're on the right side to begin with.
Okay. Anybody else want to jump on that?
Well, I do feel that it'll have some impact, and what I mean by that is, while you had 53% of I call them Euro Americans, of the Euro American population, female Euro American population, voting for Donald Trump. You also had many of them who did not. They didn't vote for the Democrats at all. So you had people who were on the fence, like many of the people who were like Bernie or bust. Bernie or bust. We will only vote for Bernie Sanders or somebody from that progressive movement. So whether you consider Senator Harris progressive or not is another subject matter. But there are people who will view her as progressive, or may view her as a progressive feminist, mm-hmm. And they may, whereas they were not going to vote at all, they may actually consider voting now.
Okay. You have a question, Ty, before I start asking questions?
No, go ahead.
So when Biden picked his candidate, excuse me, and there was many mixed emotions. And for me, I personally initially didn't per se care for her. But at the end of the day, I just want to know, why did we have to choose between Biden and Trump? Why do we, as a culture, as a people, why are we so reactive instead of proactive? Did you want to take anyone wanted to jump on that one?
Well, I think unfortunately, our community is political novices, and so there's not a lot of homework being done. As far as politics, there's not a lot of demands. There's not a lot of asks. We are voting a lot of times for all the wrong reasons. And so in this instance, Joe Biden was almost single-handedly handed the nomination by Black people. Why? You know, no one really has anything to point to other than him being Obama's VP. So,
What about you, Horace? How do you feel about that one? Why are we so reactive instead of proactive?
Well, in every election, people always say, well, why is it that we only have so few candidates to choose from in terms of but what we forget is that the presidential nominee is whittled down from a field of candidates, right? So if we go just 6 months ago, we were saying how everybody and their grandmother was running for president, right? And what happens is as they don't pick up popularity or they don't pick up steam, they fall off. So if we're going to be part of a democracy, we have to understand that the guy who we want is not going to always be the guy who everyone else wants. And that's what democracy is. What happens is that the candidacy gets whittled down to 1 or 2 or 3 people. So this is what we're left with, and this is a democracy. So we have to choose the person who best fits our ideals. It's not going to be right, but it's going to be the best what it is we're looking for.
Did you hear the last part, Todd? Because I know he broke out.
He said that what we're looking for. Again, yeah, he has that lag, so it's kind of hard to understand him.
So so I've heard people say that I don't care if it was Mickey Mouse being elected. Vote Trump out. I don't give a hell who is the actual person.
No, that's me.
But you're another person who said it. So you're meaning to tell me no matter what the individual's background is, you're just like, hey, I don't care?
In this instance, I feel that he's so... we're in a bizarre world. I mean, the villains had the run of the place. And I mean, surely almost anything with a pulse is going to be better than what we have right now. That's genuinely my opinion. I really do feel that he's demonstrably ignorant. I don't feel that he's a patriot at all. I'm in a very strange boat, like in a very strange pocket. And so until recently, I would say I was willing to listen to everybody. I was not a strict blue ticket voter. Admittedly, at the end of the day, I did always vote blue, but I would listen to both sides. I actually have a soft spot in my heart for John McCain. I actually don't really have any grievance against Mitt Romney. I mean, these are the people that have run in the last couple elections, and I genuinely try to listen to them both. And at the end of the day, I went with the candidate that I thought would best suit my needs, and it always ended up being blue, but I would listen. And I feel at the end of the day, even going back to good old W, I think at the end of the day, he had best intentions and he had the country in his heart. And even though we didn't agree on the decisions he was making, he was doing what he felt was right for the country. I feel like the person in the White House right now does what he feels is best for himself. I've never seen him do anything that was country first. If it happened to result in the public liking what he did or his side liking what he did, he only did it to get them to vote for him. You know, so anything is better than that. As long as you have the country at heart, I'd vote for a Republican if they had another one running, if it came down to it versus this guy. It doesn't matter, just not him.
Okay.
You just want him out pretty much.
Out. Yes. Yes.
Well, they have fundamentally skewed the Republican nominee to pretty much ensure that Trump would win it. In many states, whatever, they actually banned or they specifically wrote into law that you had to vote for the president incumbent representative. I believe South Carolina was one of those states that actually did that. So fundamentally, if you're a Republican president, you cannot run against, as a Republican, you cannot run against the head of your party. And once you are elected into office, whether you're a Republican or a Democrat, that president becomes the head of the actual part of that actual party. So for that matter, we're dealing with an individual who pretty much has his party in the palm of his hand, and no one in that party really is going to stand up to him. Right. However, we just recently there was an actual Republican who tried his best and I can't recall his name. He was a
I
former
do remember him.
governor, I believe he was, and he actually did run against Trump. And I mean, I think he received about anywhere from like 2 to 5% of the actual overall vote. It was in the states that he was actually allowed to contest for the Republican nomination. So everything was skewed for Trump to win it. As far as having to decide whether or not Trump doesn't matter who the person is, I think it does matter. I think it matters very significantly. In this case, whatever, we can sit back and say, listen, the negativity or the cons for Biden seriously outweigh the current situation right now, because Trump is a megalomaniac for all intents and purposes. But it still does matter that we investigate and we take into consideration the things that his opponents on the Democratic side, or even as an independent, things they've done and things they failed to do, because these will still be their they'll still be their criteria for once they actually enter office, or if they do enter office. Mm-hmm. So it does matter. We need to be. I wish more Americans were more involved in the political process of understanding the history of their candidates, so they can make an actual informed decision, as opposed to just reading what's on Fox or CNN.
Right.
How do you feel about it, Cash, when it comes to that?
I mean, for me, yeah, I think Trump is horrible, right? He's been horrible for the country. He's been a horrible president. But I think, again, just from a political standpoint, my starting position with that bargaining wouldn't be, hey, I'm just, just get the guy out and, and that's sufficient, No, look, we have some things that we need to discuss. I mean, I am going to, even if I 100% planned on voting, right, in November, like, I am at least going to make it tough on my candidate, right? I'm at least going to try to extract the maximum amount that I can from my candidate for that vote, versus, you know what, it's just too important. I just got to get this other guy out of here.
Right.
So, I'm just straight all the way over there already. I'm coming down over the pasturing first, doing a little bit of dancing, baby. Hey, look, this is what we need. This is what we want. And if we don't get that, then I don't know what to tell you coming forward.
I think it's disheartening that, like you were saying, Charles, everyone's going to push their own agenda before the fact and after the fact. And no one's agenda, like you said, is it Leon, is going to fit everything that we want. And that's what becomes very confusing for me. I'm into the kids' rights and women's rights and people of color's rights. And then you look at Harris and some of the things that she's done in the past when it came to our kids, and how she dealt with the truancy within the schools and how it affected the kids. But again, for me, it's hard to really sit down and pick who I really want, because I don't have full faith in any of them. I don't believe that none of them have me personally and our people best interests at heart all the time, because they have their own morals, ethics, agendas, and ideologies that doesn't fit us all the time.
How do you feel about that, Horace, when it comes to just like, I really don't care who.
Well,
Uh-oh. Did we lose him?
Yeah.
I think we lost.
Can we unpack what she said? Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No.
No.
Okay.
No.
So I want to unpack what she said about.
Uh-oh.
What the hell is going on? Do you not hear
Leon,
me?
no, yeah, we're going to need you to get it together. We want to hear what you have to
Yeah, we
say.
want to hear what you have to say.
Yeah, you might have to come
Hold on.
back in again.
All right, hold on. Let me log out. Try to log back in. Hold on.
No worries, no worries. While he does that, is there any way we can ask the question? There's
I
some
wanted to jump back in real quick if I can.
questions. Sure,
And so when I say get this guy out, we live in a country, thank God, that we don't have a king, right? So let's say Biden and Harris get in the office. It's kind of like Hashim said, we have other things that are really important too. Getting him out is the number one priority, because right now he is in fact acting like a king. And there's a lot of things about our Constitution that we've just completely disregarded, and that other party has just completely forgotten about. And it's the Constitution that makes this country what it is. So if we have people that are in unmarked cars and not identifying themselves, grabbing people off the street, that is very third world dictatorship type behavior that we should be very concerned about. Now, getting just anybody back in there, we have a lot of work to do on a ground level. Again, it's not one person that runs this country or two. So whether they've made all the right decisions or not, when we're out there, we're voting, we also have to remember to vote at a local level. We have to remember that there's people in every state. We have to remember that we have a Congress and a House of Representatives that has to co-sign everything they're supposed to co-sign everything that this president and vice president will do. So getting him out is the first priority, and then making sure that we have the support that we need on the next level down, and the next one down, and the next one down, in order to get our agendas and what's important to our communities put forward. But we're going to disappear off the street at this point with the people that are doing what they're doing now. So we can't stay on that road.
But I think that's important what you said about, just making sure that, we vote on local levels and start to follow it up the hill, because we forget about that. Right. We hear, it's voting time, and we just forgot that we need to start in our towns, our cities, again, and going up the hill and following what they're doing, and not just voting. Like, I don't think it's good to just go vote, beat your chest, show your sign, I voted. What else did you do? What else are you doing to keep on top of these candidates to make sure that what we're looking for and what we need is being met? Because again, they have a whole system that they're trying to run, and we're individuals trying to feed into that system. We need to be very vocal about what we're looking for and not let them slack off. We put them in. So we need to make sure that we stay on top of them so they follow what is best for us.
Well, part of the main problem that we have when it comes to politics, especially on the federal level, but you see it on the state level as well, whatever, are the political action committees. So the PACs are able to go ahead and, using their collective voting power and their collective financial power, to go ahead and support candidates that we or may not necessarily be a part of or adhere to. So and getting back to Senator Harris, one of those key issues, whatever it was, when she became the San Francisco district attorney, that was very, very interesting when she became the DA there, because she was heavily supported by the police unions. The police union supported her, and the outgoing DA, I believe his name was Terrence Halliman. Terrence Halliman was the outgoing DA. He had 41 cases of investigative inquiries going on against law enforcement, members of the San Francisco Police Department. And when she became the DA, those 41 cases all just disappeared. So now it's important to understand what an investigative inquiry is. These are not grand jury charges. This is not, the police officer being arrested. This is not them facing an actual criminal court. This is not them being sentenced yet. This is just an inquiry as whether or not the complaints against them are relevant. And she nixed all 41 cases.
Well, this goes into what you're talking about, and I think a question was presented to you. Let me just put this up here. Oh, let me do it one more time. Okay. So are you saying don't vote or vote for Biden? What's the third option?
Right now, there is no third option. Okay, typically speaking, whatever for people, there is typically a libertarian or a Green Party candidate that people who are really, really on the fence about supporting their vote, whatever, they can vote, libertarian, or they can vote, Green Party. But none of these parties have ever in the past ever controlled any of the vote enough for them to have their candidate elected into office. In the past, it was easier to get away with saying I'm gonna vote libertarian or vote green or vote independent because you weren't dealing with despots, potential despots, whatever. Okay, like we have now with Trump. At this point now, whatever, and I agree with Liz that yes, okay, this is a big deal. Whatever, we're dealing with someone who has admitted in the past that he has enjoyed reading Mein Kampf. Now, for those of us who are not his historians, Mein Kampf was written by Adolf Hitler. So he said he enjoyed reading the book. Now, I have read the book as well. I did not enjoy reading the book. Okay, I found the book very, very disturbing. Okay, as someone who we would expect that to have some type of basic level of morality, but he said he enjoyed the read, and a lot of his tactics he uses for his enforce his policies are very much out of that book. So in this case right here, to go ahead and vote for a libertarian or to vote for a member of the Green Party, we would actually be looking at potentially splitting the vote, the Democratic vote, as well as ensuring that Trump has another 4 years in office. Now, I always say out of negativity, a lot of times comes things that are positive. So one of the positive things that we've seen in the Trump administration, we get to see all the racists come out of the closet. We get to see all the bigots come out of the closet.
That is true. Everybody.
We get to see everybody. All the guys who were quiet, who wanted to harm you, but never wanted to say anything, who would act on these impulses, but in secret, are now willing to come to the forefront. And so it makes it easier for you to confront these individuals. Back in the days, we didn't know who members of the Ku Klux Klan were.
Right.
Now we knew, but we didn't know because they had their hood on, whatever, right? Now the hood has come off. Now they're proudly marching. They're probably saying we are this, we represent this, we represent. So in that aspect, whatever, that's a very positive thing to come out of his election because it allows us to now identify and confront people who are trying to do us harm and our allies harm. Right. And that's the key point at the very end. Our allies harm as well. Because if we have allies that are supporting this, we need to support our allies as well.
Well, I would say this in regards to third option. So me, myself, I'm part of, I guess what you would call a political group. Also happens to be a designation. So we call ourselves ADOS, which is American Descendants of Slaves. It's meant to give definition and sort of differentiate between those who are progeny or descendant of people who were enslaved here in America and say Black people who immigrated or whatever from Haiti or Nigeria or elsewhere in the Caribbean, etc. And so we're probably maybe about somewhere between 50 to 75,000. I mean, the YouTube channel that we kind of meet up 2-3 times a week. Yvette Carnell is the host of the show. She goes over, our goal is political education at this point and growing the numbers in the group. And so we go over different things as far as strategy and voting. Also, the book club, reading the book like every month and then going ahead and dissecting it and breaking that down. So you just become more astute, with what you're doing out here politically, which is very key. So our strategy for this school is without any sort of specific agenda for ADOS, then we can't support that candidate. We can't vote for that candidate. We will vote down ballot, which is, locally, state, city, otherwise, any referendums or initiatives. But, as far as the presidential election, just go ahead and write in ADOS or something so that, the Democrat Party and its future nominees know and understand that at least, look, I can't speak for everybody, right? But that ADOS vote or, that block wants some specific things and is requiring some specific things for that vote.
Horace, if
That
you,
would be
I'm
all terms.
sorry, Horace, thanks for joining back in. I don't know if you remember what we were talking about. I know you wanted to address what Liz had mentioned. You could just jump right in if you wanted to.
Okay, can y'all hear me? First of all, I just want to make sure my connection is good.
Yes.
Yeah.
Perfect.
Okay.
Yeah, much better, much better. That's perfect.
All right. So, yeah, before it was actually Ty. She had said something about she didn't really particularly like Harris because some of the things that she had did regarding truancy, and I just wanted her to unpack that. Like, what was it specifically that you didn't like about her truancy policies?
And no, it was just a lot of things that went on. It's not just Harris. I just mentioned Harris. I was saying is I'm not a fan of any of the candidates. I don't feel comfortable with any of the candidates that's being presented right now. Like politics right now, I'm going to be honest, it makes me very, very nervous.
Okay.
We have candidates walking into a system that we know is still very corrupt. See what's going on. So the simple fact that she was targeting a lot of our kids within the schools and again with the, just because that's what you came back focusing on, with the truancy piece, just the crap that Biden said, if you don't vote for me, you're not black. The stuff that he did back in the day, how he voted against desegregating the school, school buses, and it's going to. So I don't feel comfortable with any of them.
Yeah. So the reason why I wanted to unpack that was, I think with the Democratic Party, because there's so much misinformation being disseminated from the other side, because that's one of their tactics. Like, for example, with Senator Harris, her truancy laws, when she was the AG of California, she was enforcing a law that already existed. So she didn't create the law. She was just choosing to enforce a law that had already existed. And it was a scare tactic to get parents more involved with actually sending their kids to school. No parent was ever actually prosecuted under that law, nor did they ever serve a day in jail. Right? It was literally just a scare tactic that she was using to get parents more involved. And at the end of the day, if someone's trying to motivate parents to get their kids involved in their education, right, even if she's using a scare tactic, there has to be we have to give some real leverage to that, right? We can't just dismiss it as, oh, she just wants to lock up people, because no one ever was locked up under that actual enforcement of the law. So I think it's a lot of misinformation. Like Biden, you're talking about segregation policies that were in the 1970s, right? We're talking about over 45 years ago, right? A lot of this is just misinformation that is being promoted by the Republican Party and bots, right? Russian bots, just to get us to be afraid of Democrats and voting Democrats, and to basically practice voter depression as well as voter suppression.
Well, I disagree on that. And I may disagree on that for the following reason, whatever. While no parent may have been arrested by that, parents were in fact fined underneath that principle. Matter of fact, I believe it was about the number of 100, just a little bit over 100 parents did receive monetary fines. Now, these monetary fines could be in fact waived if their child was to go ahead and do XYZ stipends, but still the fact remains is these parents were in fact fined. Now, the ethnic demographic of those parents fined were all African American and Latino. The Euro American parents whose kids were caught in the truancy were not fined. Now, I know that doesn't necessarily have to do with Harris because finding the parent has nothing to do with her. She just brings forth the charges.
Right.
The judge that would enforce that fine, but still the fact remains is it was her office that would go ahead and would pursue the actual fines if parents were not, if it was sufficient enough. It was a sufficient enough issue. So I do think now we look at the numbers, about 100 or so. Those numbers are not really big as far as the overall arc of the actual law. But the fact remains is whatever that she did do this, and I find it interesting that she chooses to use scare tactics for a law, but doesn't use scare tactics for other laws that would affect her ability to go ahead and be possible.
Well, one thing I want to add to that. I mean, that's a great point. But I do know one of the leaders of ADOS, Tone Talk. He has a show called Tone Talks on YouTube on Fridays in the PM. And one of his most recent shows, I actually honestly have not had a chance to watch it yet, but I wanted to. But I saw his little promo for it. He's interviewed one of the women who was, I know she was definitely arrested because the cops, they, had the video clip running or whatever, her coming and being arrested by the police and everything. And apparently the interview is about her horror story under that whole arrest situation and everything like that. And I believe it's supposed to be that the child actually has medical conditions or something like that. But what I can do is I can definitely go back and put a link to that video in the comments or something, so if anybody wants to check out her story or whatever.
Speaking of, I wanted to speak of the comments because we have a lot of them coming in. So to add to what Robert was saying, just to show that, because I think the situation is like dealing with a rapist in the house, but you don't want to mess with the police, but you still have to call the police to get the rapist out. Just comparing, like,
Right.
bad guys.
Bringing candidates into the bigger picture of a corrupt system.
Yes, and then moving along, Love Supreme. Let's see here. Hopefully, the debate panel will Hopefully, the debate panel will include folks like Anderson Cooper, Trevor Noah, Rachel Maddow, one of you with a smile. Will challenge Biden and Harris perform during these debates, which may affect the decision. At the end of the day, it's interesting that we're here, though, because anybody who, and I think all you guys per se are very well vested when it comes to politics and these things and laws. How did Trump even win? How did he get here? When I heard that Trump was even one of the candidates, whatever, I'm just like, he's a con artist. How is this that he's tricking the whole world? I mean, there were people, they would not vote for Hillary at all.
Right.
I mean, and not to put it out there of which one and this, that, and the third, but why do you think that we're even in this predicament to begin with? Because Hillary and Biden are very similar in their politics now. So they're very, very similar, maybe almost the same. Go ahead.
So can I tackle that question if you don't mind?
Yeah.
All right. So to understand how Trump actually became president, you would have to understand his whole interaction with Cambridge Analytica and him being able to know the real pulse of America. So I've always told people from early Facebook days that the truth is in the comments, right? Meaning that how people really feel about something is in the comments under any topic about that thing. Because we put on this face and we pretend externally that certain things are bad and we're against certain things. But when you look into the comments, you see something totally different, because now this is a nameless, faceless person that's commenting how they feel about the subject, and they're going to tell you what they really feel, right? So when Trump was getting this information real time, he realized that the more racist he was being, that white people were tending to gravitate to him more, especially white people in states that he needed to pick up. So he could lose the popular vote, but as long as he was getting people to vote for him in South Dakota, North Dakota, Wyoming. He only had to turn a few key states in order for him to win the election, and he did. So the real election came down to about 100,000 or so people in Ohio, in Florida, in West Virginia, who voted Democrat in 2012, but then voted Republican in 2016. So he was really strategic in his approach. So while we sit here, we're thinking there's no way that a white supremacist could become president. The late great Frances Cress Welsing, the minute she heard that he was going to run for president, she predicted that he would win. Because we don't really understand America. We don't really understand what it is that we're up against, because we deal with the face of America, what they're showing you. We don't really deal with the heart of America and how they really feel and how they really act. So can Trump win again? It's possible. But to be honest with you, I don't think he will win, because I think the economy is so impacted, and it's rare that a sitting president ever wins re-election in a down economy.
Right. I agree with that, but I just want to add on one thing, though. Not only was it what Trump did, it's also what Hillary failed to do. One of the key things that Hillary failed to do was actually to go to these very same states to even speak on her agenda. Hillary Clinton primarily campaigned on the East and on the West Coast. She pretty much blew over most of the Midwest. And additionally, she only spoke in the majority of her speaking locations were at urban centers, centers of dense urban populations. She totally bypassed the majority of Middle America and the Midwest. Whereas Senator Bernie Sanders, one of the reasons why he did so great in as far as challenging Hillary for the Democratic nomination was that because he actually went to these places. He actually went to. He was on Fox not once but twice, last election and this election. Okay, willing to go ahead and debate his opponents, or go into the very heartland of his opponents, whatever, and attempt to convince them. Mm-hmm. Hillary did it. Hillary didn't care about the Midwest. She looked at, okay, I win California, I win New York, I win Pennsylvania, I win all the major urban centers, whatever. Okay, I should win. And unlike, and that's what she failed to understand. As Horace has said, like the heart of America. I've traveled across the entire United States. I've been stationed all over the United States. I've worked in drug interdiction for the United States Army, and I can tell you straight up all that. People who live in the city, they live in bubbles. When the previous night before the election, I said Trump was going to win the election, and no one believed me. I said he's going to win. And he will crush Hillary in the election. That's exactly what happened, because there are people who are so angry over Obama being elected president. The very fact, even though Obama is mixed, some people say, "Oh, he's mixed. He's actually half this." Okay? On the surface, Obama is as brown as every single last one of us. On the surface, Obama is what they would consider to be an uppity Negro. All right, and as Bill Clinton himself said, only a few years ago, Obama would be waiting the tables for us. Those are his words, quoted directly from Mr. Saxophone player himself. So, the very fact, whatever, you can have someone who will support you on your political campaign, but which is what Bill Clinton did do, but at the same time, hold racist and racist views upon you is a direct reflection of what's going on in this actual country. People, and last thing, people also equate economics with security. And the minute you do something that violates that security, you lose it.
Let's get to the comments, and this is all kind of tying into what you're actually talking about. So Brandy says, you will never get a perfect candidate. What you have to do is vote for who will benefit our families and the country the most. What we don't need is a repeat of 2016, where millions of people stayed home. With that being said, do you feel that, and I don't know, and please somebody educate me on this, I'm hearing that Kanye is supposed to be entering the race. I thought at first it was a joke, but is he actually going to be on the ballot ticket to kind of separate the vote? Or
Didn't he take himself off?
Well. Okay, so he has some Republican allies that managed to get him on a few key I forgot the word I'm looking for. But he managed to get on the ballots. That's what I'm looking for. He managed to get the ballot on a few key states, but at the same time, because of his ignorance of the actual law, he was kicked off the ballot on a couple of key states. So as far as Kanye pulling in any type of significant vote, myself personally, outside of people who attend church, I don't see too many people voting for Kanye.
I don't see him as a threat. I don't see him entering the race as being a threat to, one side or the other, pro or con. I don't think many people at all will even.
I mean, he's not even running as a Democrat. I mean, I would be more concerned if he was actually seeking the actual Democratic nomination.
Again, to the political naivety of most of the people, it doesn't really matter how many people vote, right? So 4 million less people voted in 2016 than they did in 2012. But Hillary had 3 million more votes than Donald Trump. So having sheer numbers of people vote means nothing. It's like a boxing match, right? You have to win rounds. It doesn't really matter if you knock me out 3 times in the first round, but if you didn't win any round after that, you will lose the match, right? So we don't just need millions and millions of people voting. The actual race is going to come down to 13 key states, because in reality, even though Hillary had 3 million more votes, it was about 100,000 votes in some key states that had just, even in Florida, I think the margin for victory for her in Florida was less than 30,000, right?
Yeah, the margin in state was small.
Yeah, just 30,000 more people voting in West Virginia or in Michigan, right? Could have turned that whole state, and that's 27 more electoral votes she gets, or 13 more electoral votes she gets. So what we really need to focus on is those key states and getting voter turnout up in those key states. It doesn't matter about New York, because most of those millions and millions of people that aren't voting or may vote for Kanye, those people live in New York, California. Those states are going blue anyway. Doesn't matter. Right. We need those key battleground states to get voters out in that way. All of this Kanye stuff is just distraction, right? It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. He's not going to get enough people to vote for him to even sway the election. This election is going to come down to 13 key states and people coming out in those states.
And I think that the Electoral College itself is just another manifestation of, like you saying, this being a white supremacist nation, right? That was just kind of a backstop to kind of ensure the longevity of white power, even if, more, black and brown people or whatever came. If you take Mississippi has the highest concentration of black people, right? I think Mississippi is like 35% black, and no black person has held state level office in Mississippi since Reconstruction. And the reason that is say if you run for governor of Mississippi, not only do you have to win the popular vote in Mississippi for that state office, but you also have to win a plurality of counties in Mississippi. And that's never going to happen for a black person. And that's sort of the same idea of having the Electoral College, is that it ensures that smaller, more white states or whatever, that they have much more power than probably, what would need be, and make it more difficult for, that one side to really just go ahead and move forward.
So if we want to be truthfully honest, the Electoral College does serve a purpose, no matter how outdated that purpose may be. The purpose of the Electoral College is just so that candidates do not focus on states that have the highest population, right? So a person who lives in Wyoming, we don't have 30 million people here, but our stuff matters too, right? We need farmer subsidies, we need things in Wyoming too. So we don't need all the money just going to New York and California and Florida. So the Electoral College does serve a purpose, but the reality is that as the voting populace, right, we need to understand that it's a winner take all system, right? So it's just not about getting people out to vote. Like, we shouldn't even be holding voter registrations in places like New York or California or even Texas. Texas has never gone Democrat, and it will never go Democrat, right? So you could just count that as a loss. We need to just focus on the states that we can turn, right? So if you have states that are literally what we call purple states, sometimes they're red, sometimes they're blue, right? If we really want to get Trump out of office, we need to focus on those states, making sure people are registered or to vote in those states, making sure polling places are open and people have adequate access to go vote in those places.
I've got to jump in. I got to jump in.
After you, we're going to hit the comments. After you, Liz, we're going to hit the comments. Go ahead.
Yeah. All right. So, I mean, I just feel like everything that we just said over the last, I guess, 10 minutes, it all came together, right? So, Kia, you asked, how did Trump go into office, right? And I believe it was Charles that said Hillary only focused on the states that she thought that she needed to focus on. And Horace immediately followed that with, we should only focus on those states. Well, we tried that last time and we lost. The reason that he's in office is that side, they are loyalists. Our side, we are purists, right? And I think the comment that you read came to that too, right? So we have these purity tests and we have this idea that we need to get the perfect candidate. The Messiah is not running this year. We need to get that through our heads. We're not going to get the perfect candidate. We didn't get the perfect candidate last time. And what we do need to do is we need to focus on getting every single vote, every single place that there's somebody with a post that can legally vote. Everywhere, in every state. He did not crush Hillary Clinton. She won the popular vote. And I think there's something to be said about that. And truly and honestly, the way that the system is set up, and it is meant to disenfranchise certain people. It's meant to. We need to make sure that every vote that we have gets counted. And they are literally picking up mailboxes right now to make it harder to vote. Physically picking up mailboxes in states that we say don't matter. Stop taking our votes for granted in the big states, in any state. Do not take a single vote for granted. Do not take your right to vote for granted. Don't do that. This whole notion that we're not going to vote because it doesn't matter is one of the craziest things I've ever heard. People have died for this. If it didn't matter, they would not have died for it. It matters in those 13 states. It matters in all the other states. It matters that they're doing so much to make sure that our voices are not heard as much as possible. Gerrymandering is really real. And that's their new way. So, I mean, not their new way. It's been a couple of decades now, but they have perfected the art of making our votes as minuscule as possible. Don't sleep on Texas. Texas is very purple and becoming more minority and more blue every day. So we may not win this one, but if we get this mentality that, Texas is never going to go blue, it never will. That's a fulfilling self-prophecy in that case, right? There are votes there that we can get, and they're going out of their way to disenfranchise those votes. And we in these states need to stand up for the people in those states so that one day their voices can be heard too. That's how he won last time. They fall in line. We sit around waiting for the perfect candidate that lines up with our every thought, that never made a mistake in the last 40, 50 years or the last 10 or 20. If we take for granted that people can change and they can grow, and we're going to hold it against them that they ever said one thing wrong or voted one way wrong or anything, but we're never going to win again. Ever.
But I would say this. I mean, I think.
Wait, we have a couple of
just a lot of comments. Look, all that thought, Tash.
Yeah, we have whatever we do, we have to vote early. Postal Service tampering will definitely be an issue. That's what you just spoke about, Liz. Then we also have, remember, the Russian assist.
Right.
There's a lot of them.
Okay, yeah.
America's a business, and because America fell for the facade of Trump's success as a businessman, I think many Americans thought he would enhance this country economically, which I don't know about that because look at his businesses, but we'll just leave that right
there. There is an aspect of truth to that, whatever. Okay, so for the people who are in line with Trump will look after their actual interests. So, for instance, we have the environmental acts, whatever that he had. A lot of the Obama administration environmental acts. He, with the power of his pen, struck a lot of those environmental acts off, and it allowed his business partners the people who are tied into him, whatever, to take advantage of now free, open federal land. So in that aspect, whatever, you know, if you are tied into the administration, then yes, you will prosper. And if you're not, which, you know, most of us are not, you know, the economy will go ahead and tank. And you know, and that goes without speaking of the pandemic and all the protests and all the other type of stuff that came along afterwards. But many people did vote for him because of the perceived advantage that he would give the economy, not just because of the fact that he's a businessman, he has, like, you know, these issues with bankruptcy that we all know about, but because of the fact he was tied into a lot of other businessmen who were in fact successful. So there's that perceived mentality, whatever, okay? It takes money to make money. Well, then there you go. He has money. He's tied into people with money. And therefore, you know, we can go ahead and the country will be great. Now, we learned that the hard way. Well, hopefully they would have learned that the hard way. That's not necessarily the case. His ability to and his lack of leadership when it comes to economics, whatever, is very, very self-evident. And now we're seeing that firsthand with the economy right here. But as far as voting is concerned, the biggest issue that has taken effect, whatever, is the lack of respect for states for the 15th Amendment. And for a lot of people know what the 15th Amendment is. The 15th Amendment is the ability to pretty much to vote without being discriminated against by race or race or color. The Supreme Court actually sided with states on gerrymandering. So while a lot of people think, oh, gerrymandering is bad, I mean, it's bad, gerrymandering is actually technically legal. The second part of the 15th Amendment was struck down as unconstitutional by the Supreme Court. So states can actually go ahead and make laws to do redistricting, okay? And that's why you see places like Texas, like South Carolina, like North Carolina, that are zoned where you see the voting district looks like a snake across the map. Because what they will actually do is use the census and polling material, whatever, okay, to determine which ethnicities live in these areas. And they go ahead, okay, we know this is a predominantly African-American zone, whatever, okay, they'll split that area in half to ensure that that vote is now for Democrats, and African-Americans have traditionally voted Democratic ever since JFK, that they will go ahead and cut that vote down the size. So the lack of support from the Supreme Court for the 15th Amendment, allowing Amendment 2B of the 15th Amendment to be not affected on not amendment, the
protections.
The protections afforded underneath Section 2B of the 15th Amendment allow for legal gerrymandering. And
voter suppression.
And voter suppression. That's legal here in the United States on a state level. And because the Supreme Court said it's unconstitutional for the federal government to get involved in that level. Now, there are states that have issued some form of protection for that, but most states have not.
Wow. So the question for that, and especially one of the last comments here, and I'll put that, and it ties into my question. The voting focus also needs to be on Congress and Senate members as well. How do we, as a collective, a community, how do we put that in the forefront of people's minds to say, hey, it's just not that presidential election that we need to focus on. We need to focus on this too. And then also getting people aware that, hey, voter suppression is real. It's happening. Literally, you used to put your ballot in the mailbox right there, and now it's on the truck being, pushed away somewhere. Like, how do we get this out? Because a lot of people are unaware. What do you guys feel? How do we get that message out?
So if I can address that, it's not this or that, right? It's this and that. right? So Congress is way more important than the president because a Congress can nullify a president's power, right? So if we have a Democratic president, but the House is majority Republican and the Senate is majority Republican, then we have what's called a lame duck president, right? So the reason why people focus so much on the presidential campaigns is because it's easier, right? It's easier to just remember two people and what their issues are, right? It's harder to remember your congressman, your state representative, and what their issues are and what's going on. So what we need to do is become more politically astute as a people, right? Before we can hold anyone to task about what they are or aren't doing. I mean, we have people that are steadily blaming Obama for what's happening with local law enforcement. So because a cop shot an unarmed kid in your city or county, right? The state attorney does not press charges. The police chief does not fire him. These are local elected officials. Then you're going to go all the way to the president to blame him for why that kid didn't get justice. So that's just being politically naive. You don't really understand civics or government or how any of this works, right? You look at the president as like a dictator or a king, and once he gets elected, he just does whatever he wants. The senators and the congressmen is how laws get made and laws get passed. So if you have an issue with something, you go to your congressman and you say, hey, this is what I want, or you're not being reelected. And then that congressman goes to Washington as your representative and say, hey, people in my district want X, Y, Z, and we need to find a way to make this happen. And then that gets pushed up. So to be honest with you, it doesn't matter who the president is because they're part of a party. This is why they belong to a party. So whether it's Joe Biden, whether it's some other Democrat, the reality is that he's going to fall in line with the representatives from his party. So if House Democrats and Senate Democrats, if they want something to happen, he's going to fall in line with his party, right? So as a people, first thing we need to do before we just be focused on voting, we need to become more politically astute to understand how government works, how laws work. That way we can focus on being effective in government. Because if we're just going to elect a Democrat and think that he's going to make things happen by waving a magic wand, that's not how government works. And that's why so many people have a bad taste in their mouth about Obama. We expected him to do all that stuff by magic. He's going to get elected and automatically, magically, racism ends and all black people have $100,000 sitting in their bank account. It doesn't happen like that.
Right, but there's also something else to take into consideration too, and that is the political action committees as well as lobbyists. So while you sit back there, whatever, and you can sit there, yeah, listen, I can put pressure on my actual state representative. I can put pressure on my actual on the senator for my state. Many senators have actually voted against the desires of their constituents. Okay, it's happened time and time again. All right, so because they will literally go ahead and go with what the lobbyists are pushing for, because when it's big business and these political action committees can go ahead and actually effectively can affect heavily the vote. A perfect example again was when Senator Harris, when she was the district attorney of San Francisco, she was supported heavily by the police unions. They used their group voting power as well as their group financing to heavily support her. Then, when she was elected into the office, there were some issues between her and the unions, a couple issues between her and the unions, and they were not as supportive of her in her next reelection, nor were they supportive of her when she became the Attorney General of the state of California. But still, the fact remains is whatever. Okay, the more progressive predecessor, who would actively investigate law enforcement or
prosecute cops.
Whereas she had a very dismal history of doing the same exact thing. And the question that puts a lot of people's minds is, was she in the pocket of the police unions? Now, again, like I said, let's rectify one thing. I just want to bring to attention that she did have problems with police unions later on herself. Serious problems with police unions. Okay, but I'm talking about this the initial election where she received their support. Okay, and 41 cases of police abuse suddenly disappeared from the investigation pool.
Yeah, I mean, but regardless, the reality is whoever gets the most votes win, right? So if you go out and you vote, right, the person who you want to be elected will win, and the person who you don't want to be elected will lose. So let's take, for example, in Fulton County, when our brother Rashad Brooks was shot down, the sitting district attorney Paul Howard put charges on the cops who killed him, right? Charged him with murder. That's what we wanted as a people. Okay. Now there's an election coming up. There's a runoff election coming up between Paul Howard and a person who used to work for him. Okay. I think her name was like Faye Willis or something like that. In Fulton County, there's 300,000 registered black voters, 300,000 registered black voters. So this man who put charges on a cop, what we asked our district attorneys to do, this man put charges on the cop who killed an unarmed innocent black man. And then in an election, you know how many people showed up for that election? 30,000. 32,000 people showed up to vote in that election, and Paul Howard lost 70. He lost 70 to the other lady got 70% of the vote. Okay, so in a county that's 300,000 black registered voters, only 30,000 people showed up, and the man who put charges on the race soldiers, he only got 30% of the vote. So we can't sit back and say who's in the pockets of the police union, because guess what? The police union put their money where their mouth is, and they actually put action and go out and make sure their guy gets in office. So we as black people, that's what we can't just keep sitting here talking about what they're not doing. We got to focus on what we're not doing.
And that's why I started it off talking about, that we're political novices as far as ADOS, the group that I'm a part of. Our core mission is political education, first things first, because a lot of what happens to black people, a lot of what politicians do is that they count on the fact that you're just not, either you're going to be stupid or lazy, you're not going to remember, you're not going to show up, and they're going to be able to get away with it, so,
Facts.
Okay, the lobbyists show up with a boatload of money, and I think I can get away with it, then I'm going to just take the money.
Exactly. Because we don't hold them accountable. Paul Howard was holding them accountable, right? We out here marching, rioting, looting, tearing up the streets of Atlanta. And here it is. All we had to do was just go vote and support the guy who did exactly what we asked him to do. And you got 1 out of every 10 registered voters even showed up to vote. And most of them voted for the other person.
But
yeah,
that's
the other side of that is holding people accountable, and then also being able to reward those people who go out and fight for you. If I'm going out and I'm taking arrows and you guys aren't backing me up and supporting me where it counts, which is the votes, then there's nothing I can do for you.
And that's why and let's keep it 100. That's why most politicians really do not do the bidding of black people, because black people do not really show up on election day. If we're going to really keep it 100, the reason why they don't address, if you ask the average black person, who's your state representative? Who's your congressman? Is he a Democrat? He's a Republican. What is his issue? The average black person does not know, right? So why would that congressman ever pass any sort of laws that benefit black people to the detriment of white people now not going to go vote for him? Now white people are going to turn on him because he did something to help black people. Those black people ain't going to show up to vote for you. So why would you even do that?
My question for you guys, and Liz, if you wanted to answer this, or any one of you guys. So we realize there's a disconnect. You just made the statement, Horace, about how, the average person doesn't even know this. How do we, is it teaching the youth? What is it? What tools do we need so that now that knowledge is there, so we're not having this conversation? Because even though this is a podcast and we're informing people and the answers are being, answered, at the end of the day, we don't need for these repetitive conversations over and over again. How do we change this and officially see some progression where, we can okay, people are really informed. Like, do we need to make it more fun?
We need to start holding black people accountable. right?
Well,
Because when we say things like, "Oh, I'm not voting because voting doesn't change things," and we're just voting for the lesser of two evils, when we allow Black people to push that destructive narrative and rhetoric, right? We're not holding Black people accountable, right? Not only should Black people be voting, but Black people should know exactly who and what they're voting on, right? These people are representatives for you. I met a brother just yesterday, an ADOS brother, right? An ADOS brother, right? And he said that he didn't like Obama. I said, well, why do you like Obama? Obama didn't do anything for Black people. I said, no, he said, but Obama didn't do anything for the ADOS. So I asked him, okay, well, what did the ADOS demand for him to do? Well, we shouldn't have to demand, we should already know. So this is what we're dealing with, right? And we allow people to have this sort of a mindset and just continue to walk around and like it's all cool, right? Only a child would think like that. He did something for the LGBT because the LGBT had a list of demands. He did something for illegal immigrants or for Latinos because they had a list of demands. All Black people wanted was to see a Black man got elected, and that's what we got.
ADOS didn't start until into Obama's second term, as an official group. Pretty much like almost the end.
I know that. You know that, but my point is that he's saying that the ADOS, he doesn't like Obama because Obama didn't support the ADOS, right? So here's what I'm saying to you. This is how naive we are. We have to stop giving these people a crutch, right? And allowing these people to sit back and keep just complaining. Whenever somebody complains to me about government or politics, I always put it back on them. What are you doing? Right? Who's your congressman? Have you talked to your congressman? Who's your state attorney? Are you mad that guy got shot and the cops didn't get charged? Who's the district attorney that's over that case? I don't know. Right? Oh, President Obama ain't do nothing about all these police killing. Right? Who is the district attorney in all of those cases? Are those people still elected now? Are they running for re-election? Who's going up against them? So if you're so mad, donate money to the other person's campaign to see him get elected. If DAs keep losing their job every time there's a racial killing and nobody's prosecuted, DAs will start prosecuting. Simple as that. 1 + 1 is 2. We don't have to have no marches and crying and going on and creating blackout hashtags. We don't have to do all that. Simple. If a DA doesn't prosecute, they lose their job.
It's not that simple. And I think that we're being a little bit unfair. People, you literally don't know what you don't know. Right. And so for the few of us that do know, I think it's on us to go out and be more careful about what we're saying to people and how we're saying things to people and not further turning them off. Right. And so if you ask somebody why they don't know who their elected official is or why they didn't vote, most of the time they do the whole I didn't vote because it doesn't matter. But if you actually go a little bit deeper than that. Right. So, OK, I hear what you're saying. Why do you feel that that's the case, right? And most of the time they'll say, honestly, I just can't focus on that right now. I'm focused on putting food on my table. And that's really what it comes down to, is they're focused on what they feel is most important to them. So now if we go out of our way and take just the minutes that it really does take on an individual basis to say, well, the food that you're putting on the table, you realize that the Secretary of Agriculture right now is Sonny Perdue. So the person that's regulating food costs, which is what you're worried about, and that's regulating GMOs and how healthy that food is the person from the Perdue family. They're regulating themselves now. Isn't that something that's important to you as a mom?
Wow.
Who's deciding who's putting what into the food that you're putting into your children? I think that as a mother, if you came at me that way, and not even necessarily just as a Black person or as a woman or let's get to the heart of what's important. I think first off, we need to identify what is important to us. Right? Why it's important to us, what's important to us, and what we can actually do or what we should know in order to make that change important. If you're worried about getting your kids to school, you should know Betsy DeVos and who she is and where she came from and that she came from a profit education. You should know that. And I think that if you said to somebody, who's the Secretary of Education, and you just expect them to know while they were busy trying to get their kids to school, that they're like, I was busy trying to get my kid to school. Well, what's going on at that school? How did your school get that funding? You think your kid's school is funded enough? I think that
So-
when you start asking people important questions and not just pointing a finger about how, you know, you're just ignorant or you're just being lazy or anything, I think the only thing that we do is turn them off. We don't need to preach to the choir anymore. The choir got it. That's why they're there Sunday morning for everybody else is. Right? We need to turn them out and we need to preach to the congregation now. And be careful about teaching when you're doing that, right? Ask the right questions to get to the right point. And if they don't have the answers and they're interested, then go further. And if they're not interested, figure out why they're not interested. There's layers to this onion. There's reasons that we feel that our vote doesn't count. We have been disenfranchised. That's a fact. That's not made up. Nobody woke up in the morning and decided, you know what, I don't matter. And I don't feel like I should matter. They don't matter. That's an actual fact. They don't matter. But what are we going to do to matter in the future? And I mean, those things that matter to us, we need to make sure it matters to the next person too. So I think it's unfair to just go with, because we're novices or because we don't know. We don't know for a reason. And they keep us distracted for a reason. The projects exist for a reason. They want us poor and comfortable.
Yeah, that's just another manifestation of white supremacy.
Yeah, but you know what? I think in that regard, though, whatever, there's an amount of personal responsibility that you have to take in charge of your actual life.
Yes.
For people who are involved in the actual projects, whatever. Okay, I grew up right next to the projects, so while I didn't grow up in the Polo Ground projects, I was affected by everything from the Polo Ground projects. Okay, and I knew very well, whatever, that it's up to me to, if I don't want to go and continue living in the actual hood, whatever, that I actually have to do something. But to reinforce that fact, though, is the fact that we look at ourselves as, oh, the Latinos over here, they have their agenda, and the LGBTQ, whatever, ABC, whatever, they have their group over here. There's a failure of understanding that African Americans are in all these groups. Okay, you have African American lesbians, African American gay people, African American queer people. Okay, African American transsexuals. We have Afro Latinos. Okay, all right, they're part of our group as well. All right, all of these groups make up the greater aspect of the people who suffer from the African diaspora. Okay, and we keep on separating ourselves, whatever, and saying, oh, it's just African Americans, it's just this, whatever. We're only anywhere from 13 to 15% of the actual overall population. How much power do you actually really, truly think we really have at 13, 15% of the actual overall
on a federal level?
On the federal level, exactly.
Yeah.
We don't. Now, maybe in a state like maybe Mississippi, where we make up a sizable portion of the actual state, maybe we may have some number power there, whatever. Okay, but on a federal level, 13 to 15%. So the agendas of our own subculture need to be our agendas as well.
But I think it's important to note the differences and the delineation between all of the different groups, and all of the different groups are probably going to have different or variant agendas, right? Because each of these groups were formed by different circumstances and were impacted differently, and now because of their history and what has happened to them over time, find themselves in different places, right? So Puerto Ricans, for example, right, they have a whole thing going on where they are a U.S. territory, right? And so Puerto Ricans really have to figure out what it is that they need or what it is that they want, given that reality. ADOS, American Descendants of Enslaved People, we have a certain particular reality. We actually are a group that have a justice claim against this country. So it's not really just a matter of even just that you're showing up and you're saying, well, hey, I'm kind of downtrodden. It would be nice if you can help us out. You are our government. No, it's, look, you made us downtrodden. Like, if not but for you, we would not be downtrodden. It is your responsibility, because of theft, because of a debt for services rendered, that you go ahead and you provide us with these specific items to go ahead and correct them. Different people have different concerns.
Yeah, we have so many comments. Can we? Yeah, you want to start? Do it, Ty?
Well, we have a whole lot to go back to. Hold on, because we have Justo stated earlier. It all starts in the community and at the school level. Teach the children, grab the future, and get out of there and get your community together. which, you know, you had asked the question, like, what can we do to educate people? And I think that's a good idea, making sure we educate our kids, educate ourselves first and then educate our kids. Let's see. Yeah. Love Supreme, push for political education. Frankly, the school systems here in Atlanta is subpar for starters. Am I going through all of them?
Yeah, so far so good.
Okay. But Paul Harris was fighting for other problems as well. This is to backtrack what we talked about earlier. The average white person doesn't know. The thing is, they have money. And here we go. Oh, let's see. So Robert, go introduce the person to the elected official instead of laughing at them. And I think this speaks to what you were saying, Liz. We get on here and we run our mouth, and these people don't do the research. We don't do this. Again, you know, just looking at it in a different perspective, in a different way of educating people and bringing them together and making them and helping them be more aware of who's in their community making laws and changing things.
Go
ahead.
Oh, I was going to say, well, you can read this one. I was going to go back to a comment that you missed, but go ahead.
Okay, a good majority don't typically care unless we are directly affected and can actually see and feel how that affect. I agree with Liz.
So another one that was mentioned from Annie, we don't need to beat up people because they have a lack of knowledge from every platform, podcast, etc. We can reach and teach them. So I wanted to say, I think it has to be a balance when it comes to the holding yourself accountable and having that own self, preservation and saying, hey, I'm going to get out there and these things. But at the same time, trying to be able to find that approachable method, because at the end of the day, I feel like society as a whole is very superficial. So even regardless, if you wasn't even considered, because there are people out there who don't have kids, so they're not affected by the educational system. And there's people out here who don't hold guns, so they're not affected by gun laws. Like, okay, whatever. There's no skin in the game. So with that being said, I feel there has to be some type of, awareness and stop being so superficial. Because if you think about what an average person's doing, they're not in their political policies. They don't know. It's so simple to pick up a book. I think reading a book these days is really taboo. It's a taboo subject. I know we have the internet and these different things that are at our fingertips, but the knowledge is there. And at the end of the day, I have to jump back to this. When someone tells me that they're not going to vote, it just peels my skin off. Regardless of who you vote, when you say that you don't want to use this right, especially if you're my complexion, I'm just kind of like flawed.
Can we keep it 100 though? Can we just call it what it is? When a person says that they're not going to vote, it's because they're not educated on what exactly it is that they're voting for, right? So that's why they don't vote, right? And we have to stop coddling people, especially African Americans, because I hate this, when we believe that, Black people are so busy, with the day-to-day of being Black, that they don't have time to do things that edify themselves, right? When every Black person knows the latest TikTok video, when every Black person is out here doing the latest challenge on IG, when every Black person know who Yo Gotti is dating or who this person Meg Thee Stallion is dating, when we are so wrapped up in the mundane, right, existence, and we know all the latest fashions and trends and songs and challenges, I don't want to hear you ain't got time to learn things that really have something to do with something. Right? I don't want to hear how you
said if you don't know, you don't know. If you're not affected by that to learn about it, then it's as this platform, I think it's our responsibility not to coddle, but to educate. And educate doesn't mean coming at someone. You come at me a certain way with a certain tone, I don't care what you have to say, how valuable it is, it's shutting me down. Help me understand what I don't understand without making me feel like I'm an idiot. We have white folks in the rest of the world that do that to African Americans. So I definitely don't need my people making me feel that way when I'm trying to better myself, my community, and my bloodline. And I think that's what you were speaking towards. Again, educate me, help me understand. I don't know what you know. We all play a different role in the bigger scheme of things. We all contribute something different.
But the unfortunate thing, Ty, unfortunately, there are people that you cannot even have that simple conversation with. You know, and I don't want to say that that's a lost cause. You want to say that there's hope for everybody.
But there's a thing called willful ignorance, right? Some people are just willfully ignorant, right? I mean, they understand. Let's keep it 100. The reason why wealthier people vote at a higher level than poor people, because they're more affected by the laws, right? A lot of people are not really invested in government because, to be honest with you, they have no skin in the game, right? They don't own any land, right? They don't really pay any significant portion of taxes. Most of them get tax money back, right? So they don't really have any skin in the game.
By how they're changing healthcare, how we're accessing systems. So, you know.
I disagree with that significantly. You know, the laws here in the country, whatever, there are some laws that will affect you more based upon your economic background. But there are definitely significantly laws, whatever, that will affect you, okay, right here in the United States, as well as administrative procedures. See, that's the thing what a lot of people don't understand. Not everything is written as an actual law. Some things are written as administrative codes. An administrative code is simply something that the city council puts into effect. Now, if you go ahead and you violate that administrative code, guess what? You're behind goes to jail. An administrative code would be like spitting on the street. Now, it is not a criminal offense to spit on the street here in New York Street, but the administrative code for that states that it is a civil offense and you can be detained. And in the process of being detained, if they find something on you, now they got you. Okay, so when we see police officers here in New York City stopping minority people for spitting on the street or for crossing or jaywalking, all right, and they're not stopping people of European descent doing the exact same thing, we know exactly what laws affect us. It is a law that they are putting into place to put more of us into the actual prison. Okay, because if anyone who actually really studies the 13th Amendment, the 13th Amendment pretty much says that you cannot be held in slavery as private property, but your ass is still being held in slavery, whatever, by the actual federal government for crimes that you have committed. All right, so those are laws that affect us, whatever, whether or not we think they affect us or not.
Right.
Now, there are economic laws, whatever, okay, that I agree with you on, Horace, whatever, that, for instance, such as property tax being used to fund school education, all right? They're like, oh, no way, whatever, okay? I don't want my school system being, having people from a lower poverty level school zone being bused into my school. Because what? I pay taxes for these services, whatever, okay? For my property. So to a certain degree, I understand that, whatever, okay? I can sit there and listen. If I dished out $100,000 in taxes, whatever, okay, I want to be represented by my $100,000.
Right.
Okay. And the guy down the street, whatever, who's only paying $100 or maybe getting back a kickback off his taxes, whatever. I'm sorry, you don't have no say so what goes on in my school. To a certain degree, I understand that. However, okay, that system was set up specifically to have that type of result. That system, back in the day, education was not funded by property tax. Education was funded on the state level, evenly distributed among all. It was after the Civil Rights Act of 1964 did they begin this entire process of funding schools by property tax, just for the reason of circumventing school integration. That's what the entire process was for. To stop school integration, to continue on with at least a form of segregation.
And my whole thing is going back to what Kia was talking about. It's just holding people accountable, right? It's not to ridicule. It's not to lambaste. It's just to hold them accountable. If you're out here complaining about the government, I hate, and hate is a strong word, but I'm using hate. I hate when people act as if the government is a sentient being. The government is just a collection of people, right? Right now in our government, there are 537 people who collectively make up Congress and the vice president and the president, okay? If we changed all of them, right? Because a brother was telling me the other day, man, we need to overthrow the government. Overthrowing the government is just removing the people from the office that's there now. We get to do that every 2 years.
Yeah.
We get to overthrow the government every 2 years, right? The government is not it's not like a monarchy or a dictatorship where we physically got to get a military coup to overthrow the government. We just have to vote the people in out. And the highest voter turnout Black people have ever is 62%. And that was when we voted for Obama in 2008. In most elections, the Black voter turnout is only about 50%. We have the second lowest voter turnout right above Asians. And we talk about how Asians barely vote. And they vote in the 40% and we vote in the 50%. So about 50% of elected Black voters, registered Black voters, vote in most elections, right? And in most Black people who could vote aren't registered. So when you factor in how many Black people are actively not participating in election processes, we don't have a right to complain, right? The reason why we get from the bottom is because we are not now granted, the reason why we were not politically involved was for fear for a lot of those years. We didn't vote because we were scared the Klan was going to come get us, right? But then in the 60s, when they actually had the Voter Right Act, we from then have been slow to get politically involved. And that has to change. And we have to hold people accountable. Anytime somebody come to me complaining about the government, I put it back on them. What are you doing? Who is your congressman?
I think politics is an adult thing, right? And for so long, the positions that African Americans have, had in this country really is as the children. As the children, pretty much of the dominant white society. The dominant white society is going to decide what time the lights go out, what day the Sabbath is on, anything. Anything that they want, they go ahead and decide, and we just, go ahead with it. Your children, they don't think about money. They don't think about some of the more complex issues. They just kind of do whatever it is you say, show up when you say to go or whatever, and, kind of going along for the ride. But we are going to have to we are going to have to be adults, and we're going to have to put our big boy pants on and really do some strategizing and everything. Like I said, that's the main core mission of the group ADOS or whatever, is really to bring more people into the process, get people, intellectually curious, into, how do things work, how do things go, because really what I tell people in general, whether it's just individually or even as groups, right, as groups of people, you have to be able to figure out how you're going to feed yourself tonight and how you're going to feed yourself for life, right? All at the same time. All at the same, because you can't waste time. Okay, you got this menial job, right? You have a way to feed yourself for tonight, essentially, right? But you never really do anything to figure out how you're going to feed yourself for the rest of your life. Like, is it going to be here at this menial job for the rest of my life? Or am I actively, okay, you have to go to work. Even if you got to go to work for 12 hours at this warehouse, whatever, right? After that 12 hours, I have to spend some time. I have to invest some time in how am I going to advance myself? What is my further strategy down the line for the rest of my life? Am I going to school in my spare time? Am I picking up a trade? What is it that I'm doing? And I don't think that, especially as a group, African Americans, for myself, what kind of attracted me to the ADOS thing was before that, I did not really see people out here with some sort of plan of action. A goal, like this is the ultimate goal, and then this is how we're going to get to that goal. There's been rumors and talks along the way. Some people were saying, everybody go back to Africa. Some people were saying we're going to get, our own island in the Caribbean, or maybe our own state in America. All these different, floating ideas or whatever. You can't really judge success or failure. You can't really plan unless you really have a concrete goal for where you guys are trying to get to. So I think, for us, the goal is reparation, right? So, which means, cash in hand, but also robust, transformative government programs that is aimed to bring that group of people who were affected by slavery in America, to a position where really they should have been at. Their birthright, what they were due, what they were owed. So that's why I kind of really
just to jump in real quick, I just want to say to just to start wrapping up. There's 2 last comments if you could read that, Ty, and then we could have our panelists give their last thoughts. If you could read Annie Shannon.
Yeah. We have a comment from Annie Shannon. Love tips, actually helping me to think of and devise more ways to help me from where I sit. So again, this is good. You guys.
And that's actually my mother, and I would love to just give a quick happy birthday to my mother. Today is her birthday.
And then we have Love Supreme, perhaps a community forum like Richmond or a community meeting leading up to the election.
So, Liz, if you could just give us some final words in reference to, this whole, you seem very, you have your Democrat hurdle. You can give us some closing words,
I mean, so here's the biggest thing is they're using really, really big weapons against us. And the biggest problem we have is that we're using the same exact weapons, right? Just summing it up in 3 words, our biggest issues that we're facing are disinformation, division, and distractions, right? So those are our 3 biggest problems. And so, Leon, you mentioned everybody's up on, latest TikTok and what's on the gram and everything else. That's distraction. And I personally am a big believer in that all of this is done by design. Again, they make it to make poverty as free and as comfortable as possible for people. And when I say comfortable, really nobody likes being impoverished, right? But my rent's really low, maybe I can make it. And there's no real reason to drive towards, or maybe if I paid a little bit more, I could live someplace else. You're just trying to make it fair. All of this is done on purpose, right? Division, we have so many groups of what's really black, or what's, or a rich woman is different than a poor woman, and, everything else. So it's division. That's huge, right? We sit around trying to define everything and everybody and find these purist candidates and these purist solutions. That's unreasonable. We need to get together and be united. They're united and they keep winning. We're divided and we keep falling. And we need to see it for what it is. Stop being distracted. Stop being divided, and stop giving in to disinformation. The information is really easy to come by. It's at your fingertips all day, every day. Go find it. And that's really what it is, in my opinion.
Thank you for that. Thank you so much, Liz. Cash, any last thoughts?
Just to encourage everyone to, get politically educated. Find you a group. Like I said, my group is ADOS. The website is ADOS101.com. Yvette Carnell on YouTube holds information sessions basically on Mondays and Wednesdays, Tone Talk on Fridays, book club one Thursday each month. We recommend a book to read, and then we go ahead and or read over that book and go over some of the finer points and everything like that. So, have some intellectual curiosity, get out here on YouTube. There's a wealth of information and everything, and stay active.
Thank you so much, Cash. Horace, if you could leave us with some final thoughts.
All righty. So real quick, the first thing I want to say is that change for you and whoever you are, fill in the blank. Change for you is going to happen on the local level, right? Your school board, your city council, what's happening in your city. So the first thing we need to do is, Black people, we need to stop being so spread out, right? If we want to think and act as groups, we have to do the first thing. Of the root word in community is commune. So we have to at least live in the same area so we can have the same politics affecting our area, right? So that has to deal with law enforcement. That has to do with what the school is looking like. So when we keep leaving and divesting from our community and moving into white communities and sending our kids to predominantly white schools, and then we're being trolled by white cops who are looking out for the interests of the white members of that community, then we're always going to be on the bad end of the stick, right? So the first thing we need to do is focus on local, because change for Black people is not going to necessarily happen on a federal level. Everything that already needs to happen, we have Fair Housing Act, we have the Equal Employment Opportunity Acts. I mean, every law that we need on a federal level to protect or to promote the livelihood of Black people has already been passed. Now we just need to focus on things from a community level and be locally involved in politics, right? Because the reality is the two parties are just rich white men versus everybody else. So people who are married to rich white men, people who want to become rich white men, that's the GOP. And the Democrats, we're just a coalition of everybody else, right? So on a federal level, there's not really much that's going to happen for Black people. We need to make that change happen on the local level.
Thank you so much. And Charles, any final words for you?
During the civil rights era, one of my favorite speakers was Fred Hampton of the Black Panther Party. And he made a very, very clear statement when he went to the various colleges, and he said that he built an actual coalition. He said the disenfranchised need to work together. He said, your problem as my brother is my problem. My problem is your problem. So the issue that we have is this whole level of division within the African-American community, thinking that just because you're part of the LGBTQ population, you're not Black. That just because you're Afro-Caribbean, you're not Black. If you're not Afro-Latina, yeah, but you're not Black, okay? He understood this. Fred Hampton understood this, why he was assassinated by the FBI for this. He understood that you have to build all these community groups among all the various aspects within your own community, as well as the larger community as well. That is why there was a White Panther Party. A lot of people don't know that there was a White Panther Party, and their mission and their agenda was the same exact thing as the Black Panther Party. He helped the Young Lords get started. Okay, that was an all Latino group, whatever. Okay, that did their thing as well. All these groups, they all effectively worked together until he was assassinated. So the fact is, the disenfranchised, you have to work together, and you have to go ahead and understand that all of our problems are important. And if we support each other and each other's problems, when it's my time to go ahead and get my stuff together, I'll have allies because I supported them with their causes.
Thank you so much, Charles. And Ty, can you have anything for us?
I just want to say thank you to everyone for coming on. Again, being able to sit down and listen to everyone and, the history and just giving me education, it's helped me settle a little bit. I know it's, along with some other listeners that we had on the podcast. And again, we're just Just keep being educated, keep reaching out to folks, and I mean, that's really it. That's all I have to say.
And my last words is just to say, kind of piggybacking off what Ty said, you know, please, please, please pick up that book. The word book and reading is not taboo. We all can do it. We used to be able to do it before the internet came out. And then if you're tech savvy, go ahead and do that research. A lot of times, I remember talking to you, Horace, recently, and he jumped up. And he was saying to me, you know, a lot of people read just those comments that they see on Facebook or those little sound bites. And then from there, you know, we make our opinions, or maybe we're on that talk radio listening. So we're just, you know, we do ourselves a disservice if we're just not doing the full research and getting all that information. I'm sorry that I think something happened. Horace had jumped off real quick, but just thank you, Horace, thank you, Cash, thank you, Charles, and thank you, Liz, for definitely sharing your commentary and just keeping people informed. So thank you once again, okay?
Night.
All right, good
Thanks,
night.
man.
Bye.